how it affects young girls. And probably most of you are too young to recognize this poem, but it was a very popular poem when I was growing up as a kid. And it sort of categorizes little boys and little girls in different ways. And it says, what are little boys made of? What are little boys made of? Frogs and snails and puppy dog tails, and that's what little boys are made of. So they're rough and tumble, and they get out and they just have fun. And what are little girls made of? What are little girls made of? Sugar and spice and all that's nice, and that's what little girls are made of. And the pieces on the wall behind Yana, if you can still see her, I don't know, but when her screen comes back up, you'll be able to see those. But those were two pieces that I made with an image of my daughter, who's now 13, but they're printed on vintage sugar sacks. And sugar, again, most of you are too young to know this, used to come in fabric bags and not in the paper bags that we get them in today. And women would take these sacks and they would repurpose them and make clothing out of them, or kitchen towels, or different things like that. And so I was wanting to look at, this representation of little girls, of always having to be sweet and everything nice, and all of this pressure that gets put on little girls to be a certain kind of way. And so this first project was dealing with the societal pressures of being a little girl. And then I was also thinking about the 16th Street Baptist church bombing that happened in the 60s. I'm really interested in how things that happened a long time ago, it almost looks like they're still being repeated, or they're just, it's just showing up in a different, there's still a lot of pressure. But this, for those of you that aren't familiar with this, this news, there was 4 little girls who were killed in a church bombing in Alabama by members of the Ku Klux Klan who put dynamite in the near the basement of this church. And the girls had just come in and they went downstairs. They were getting dressed or freshening up, before they went up to service. And one of the little girls' sister, Addie Mae Collins, had a younger sister that was with them as well. The little sister had gone into the bathroom. And so when the bomb went off, it killed the 4 little girls you see here. But the baby sister survived. She had I think she lost an eye, but she's still alive and she's still telling her story. And they were just little girls trying to go to church, right? So what I did is took my daughter, this is my youngest daughter, and I have another daughter who's 13. And there's another lady at church who has 3 daughters. So there was 4 little girls that were killed and 1 little girl survived. They all went to church together. So I took these 5 little girls from my church and I photographed them in different scenarios, thinking about what little girls are dealing with today. So the first group of images, they are in their church clothes, just dressed and ready. And all of these are printed, the images are printed on cotton fabric and then hand sewn onto these vintage sacks. And I use cotton very intentionally, because for me, cotton speaks to my ancestry as an African American and a descendant of slaves in this country. And I think when someone sees me and they see the work printed onto cotton fabric, or they see the representation of cotton in the work, that it takes the mind automatically to a certain place. And my father was from Greenwood, Mississippi, which was the 4th largest producer of cotton in the country. So there's a long history of connection to the landscape and connection to cotton in particular in my family. This is my oldest daughter, but my second child. Also printed on a vintage sugar sack, similar to the pieces that, like I said, are behind Yana in her video screen. This is the oldest of the young girls that belong to another woman at my church. So the first group of images of them are just in their 30s. but using these vintage sacks to kind of connect us to a past. The sacks already have a history of their own. They have a life that they lived during another time, and that time could have been, they could have been in use or being purposed for something during the time when that bombing happened. So I like that. It's like subtle connection. Then I also photographed all of girls' masks on, and it's a little bit of a nod to the importance of a girl's voice and how society sees that. We often tend to want to put children in their place. They should be seen and not heard. They don't need to in adult conversation. I'm not of that mindset with my children. I believe that they do have a voice, and I love for them to engage and debate and talk and learn how to express themselves. But society in general doesn't always treat that way. And in particular, I think little girls, we're often more open to listening to what boys have to say than girls. So these are not sugar sacks. These are actually flour sacks. So you can see the size has gone up a little bit on them. Sugar only came in certain sizes, not huge. Nobody was buying, 25-pound bags of sugar back in the day. So, and the imagery that you see behind the girls are all vintage quilt tops with a light shining back behind them. And to me, when the light came through, it really reminded me of stained glass windows you might see in a church, the way they kind of illuminate and glow. And once again, these are all images printed onto cotton fabric and then hand sewn onto these sacks. One of the, I don't know if it's like my go-to styles of photographing, doing portrait work, is I love these silhouettes. And I started doing this almost like cameo style portrait work when I wanted the sacks larger. They only came in, and this is actually the largest of a hoop. You can get 27 inches on the longest side, but the sacks, even if you source them, most of the ones with patterns on them were smaller. And so I started sourcing vintage bed sheets that had patterns similar to what I was seeing in the flour sacks or the feed sacks, and photographing people behind these flat sheets, because that allowed it more of the figure in and to create a sack or a piece larger than I could source. So all of these images are with vintage bed sheets, and I'm really kind of interested in those areas where you can see through the sheet a little bit, and it's hard to tell in these slides, so I apologize for that. But the closer the figure is to the actual sheet when I photograph them, you often have little hints and little windows where you can see in a little bit of a pattern on their clothing, maybe a logo, or one eye looks really clear compared to the other one. And so it's really a little window sometimes, and I like it when it does that. So these are all printed on fabric and then framed in these vintage embroidery hoops. And embroidery hoops I've started using a lot in my work. I think it speaks to women's placemaking and women's sense of home. When a woman picks up an embroidery hoop, she's making something that she expects to get passed down through the generations. She's not making a dish towel. She's sitting there over time and embroidering something into that piece that, you probably all have something that your grandmother embroidered in a chest somewhere at home. And then I also photographed the girls in these mylar blankets, which are the blankets that normally people would take camping with them. They're very thin. If you hold them up to the light, you can see through them. But they're also the blankets that they were giving to the babies down on the border. And, in 2020, we saw all kind of news footage of these children in cages with nothing but these little thin blankets to sleep just heartbreaking to me. And so I wanted to speak to what was going on down there. And so you see that on these sacks, they look very government issue, with sometimes just some stencil that shows up on them, very generic and bland, no sense of warmth or color or life to them at all. And then these girls standing in the blankets or sitting or whatever pose they're in almost speaks to a sense of royalty, something about the way the light hits them and they pick up a little color in the space, and that shows up in the photograph, envelops the babies almost in this sort of regal love, if you will. And then like with a piece like this where you can see daughter's shoes, and she's obviously got on 2 different size socks, and the laces she hasn't been tying her laces, been throwing the shoes on, so they've gotten all messed up. Just speaks to their youth and their innocence, and just them being these precious beings in this environment, in this bland, very government issue looking like space. I don't know who Timothy is, but okay. And then lastly, I photographed the girls. I gave them a blank protest sign. I didn't tell them what to put on there. I just gave them a sign. I took markers and bought them all kind of supplies. And I said, here you go. You make whatever you want on this sign. And then I didn't even see the sign until they came to the studio, and I photographed them on like a white seamless. And so this is their voice that you're seeing on these signs. And these are also stitched onto vintage sugar sacks. But this one says, no justice, no peace, I can't breathe. And I think what was really inspiring to me was how woke, if you will, these girls are. Like, they're totally aware of what's going on in the world around. Not oblivious. They're not focused on sugar and spice and everything nice. They're really aware of what's happening in the world around them. Still I Rise, taken from a Maya Angelou poem. Black Girls Matter, I Can't Breathe. And then I didn't tell them what to wear either when they came for their photo shoot. And I just love that she came here with this shirt on that says, I am, and it listed wonderful attributes that she has. This one's hard to read, but it says, my skin shouldn't be a death sentence. And then this is my youngest, and I photographed her in my classic silhouette style with a blank protest sign, because she's 5. She just turned 5 in August. And what I'm really trying to say with this piece is, we don't know what her protest is going to be when she gets to a certain age, but you can look at everything that's happened in the past and what young girls have had to go through. There's going to be a protest. I apologize. I live near the airport, a military base, and the plane's going over. I don't know if you can hear that, but so I wanted this to be sort of protests to come and show a young girl in a position of strength and determination, even though we can't see whatever is going to be written on the protest sign. Hopefully, if I'm right, she'll be out there with a protest sign. And then I wanted to end this section with this contemporary version of what little girls are made of that just came out in February. And it says, what are little girls made of? What are little girls made of? Sun and rain and heart and brain. That's what girls are made of. They've got heart and they've got brains. What are little boys made of? What are little boys made of? Except for little things, pretty much the same. That's what boys are made of. So they're not trying to downplay the boys, but I really loved how this one just shifted that older version upside down and spoke something else into a little girl's life. So this next body of work is called And Thy Neighbor, and this was created while I was in residence at Art Pace I guess it's been about a year now because it was October of 2020. We're almost to October. And it was based on master and neighbor. Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And I am a person of faith, and that idea of loving someone as yourself is very important to me. And I wanted to do a project on immigration, with what was going on last year. But I wanted to shine a light on particularly immigrants and refugees of African descent. I think that in this country, a lot of times when we say immigration, our mind automatically goes to Latin or Hispanic immigrants and the issues there. And I'm not saying that it's not a horrible experience for any ethnicity when they're trying to come into this country as a refugee. But things can be extra hard for people with black skin. And we don't hear those a lot. I'll tell you one that I heard while I was researching this project. There was a group of Haitians, and this was years ago. We're dealing with the whole thing now, but this was years ago. A group of Haitians that the government was going to deport, and they put them all on a plane. And because they're being deported, they're handcuffed in their seats. And they left them on the tarmac for, I believe it was like 16 hours, handcuffed into their seats. We're talking men, we're talking women, the whole gamut. And then they changed their mind and took them off the plane and put them back into centers. And I mean, that's just inhumane. That's not treating someone as you would treat yourself. That's treating them as if they don't matter. So for this project, I spent probably the first few weeks of my residency just trying to build connections. A lot of immigrants and refugees don't want their faces to be shown. So my process of photographing people in silhouette, I think, worked really well. They relaxed a lot more when they knew that I wouldn't be showing their face and I wouldn't be giving out all their information. So these pieces are, again, fabric, cotton fabric. The images are printed onto cotton fabric and then framed in embroidery hoops. But what the residency allowed me to do was to work with other craftsmen. It gave me funds to pay somebody. And so I was able to work with a woodworker and create embroidery hoops much larger than I would ever be able to purchase. So these are 70 inches on the long side, whereas, as I mentioned earlier, if you were to source one, the largest you could get was probably 27 inches on the longest side. So that allowed the figures to be a little bit larger than life when you come into the space, and have a kind of weight, a presence that really affects the viewer when they come into. Also, what's on these pieces that you can't see is in the bottoms are embroidered their ethnic background. So with the last one, she's from Ghana, so it's embroidered in here. It says Ghanaian American. And I picked thread that was the same color as the silhouettes, so you wouldn't be able to see them at first glance. And I'm gonna say, I didn't put any detail shots in here for you guys as well either, because this work is on display at Tally Done. So if you want to see that, maybe that'll give you a little teaser to go see if you can find that embroidery and read about it. But the idea being that when you meet someone, you have to move in close. You have to allow space, connection, in order to really get to know that individual. So I made all those little hidden embroideries. A little background on these two girls, Beth Lee and Nyeka. They came to the United States in 2010, after, I believe it was 2010, there was a huge earthquake in Haiti, and the girls both had their legs damaged to the point where it was believed they were going to be amputated. Both girls are going to have both legs amputated, but they were able to come to the States, and because of the medical quality, the quality of the medical treatment that they received, their legs were saved. They stayed with a host family in San Antonio, and they've been able to grow up here, and now they're beautiful, young, early 20s, young women because of that. You know, just come here and get that minute. So, Elaine, she's also from Haiti. Donna is Jamaican. This is Jubim. He's 16. He's from Nigeria. His mother's a doctor. This is Juliana. She's from Kenya. It was so wonderful to meet people from all over the place, and everyone was just so sweet and humble and just so excited to be a part of the project. I gave everyone who participated a print of their piece. This is Leela and Ruben. Ruben is Afro-Colombian, and Leela is his daughter, and she's biracial, which speaks to just the fact that he came here and met Leela's mother is the only reason she exists. I mean, just beautiful story and she's an actress and very vibrant and happy young lady in high school. This is Lemmy. He's from Ethiopia. He was adopted. Dako. She's from Rwanda, a model. My first time really working with a model. She came I think it threw me off a little bit. She had wardrobe change. She was willing to take all her clothes off. You know, she struck poses for like 30 minutes. I was like, no, we don't need to take our clothes off. Not that kind of party. And then Sho is Nigerian, and he's really the one that helped me make these connections with a lot of the other refugees and immigrants. He is a big presence in that community in San Antonio, and not only a big presence, he's a very tall gentleman as well too. But so that's really what helped me to be able to do this project, was making those kinds of connections. Shonda. And I didn't tell them what to do for their poses. I just, she constantly smiles, and you can kind of sense that in her silhouette that she's smiling. And then Stephanie and Gloria. Stephanie's a seamstress, and she came dressed to the nines for the photo shoot and had on this lovely jewelry. First, she didn't want me to photograph her daughter, but then when she saw what the silhouette looked like, she kind of said, oh, okay, well, you can photograph her if you want to. So that worked out great. The mother and daughter really helped the project, I think, feel more complete. So then I posted a couple of images to talk about, and that's images that just came out last week with the Haitian refugees down on the border. And I want you to just look at these images with the Border Patrol on these horses. That's a whip in his hand. What does this look like? I'm always looking at the past and what's happening in the present. This could be a plantation. These could be the old years. These look like slaves that are being forced to be put back to work. And this is 2021. 21. It's ridiculous. So I threw that in because it's so tied with the importance of, this idea of seeing individuals as neighbors, as community, as family, as friends, as human beings that just need help. Not to be treated like this. Look at that baby. How far did she come? Just to run into this guy. moving on. Hopefully nobody's getting depressed with this. This project, A Tale of Two Greenwoods, I was asked to create a body of work for an exhibition in Tulsa with another artist named Skip Hill that was to be a marker centennial of the race massacre that happened in Tulsa in 1921. And these images that you're seeing are postcards that came out after this massacre occurred. You know, it's one of those. A black man was accused of being inappropriate with a white woman. A mob ensued. They ended up going into this very prosperous all-black community called the Greenwood District in Tulsa. They were also sometimes referred to as Black Wall Street because of how prosperous they were. These are individuals who moved out of the Deep South wanting to build a new life for themselves. They had hotels, they had clubs, they had movie theaters, they had, beautiful homes on tree-lined streets and schools and the word, or what I've heard, is that the money circulated within their community. Like, a lot of them would sometimes take jobs. Some of the women would work as domestics in a white community, but they would bring their money back and circulate it in their own community. So they'd shop at their own stores and that sort of thing. So they did really, really well. Well, when this happened, this mob went in and they even deputized citizens just for the event. So, like, they were deputizing random people to go into this community and wreak havoc. They burned down homes. They came in with a plane and dropped bombs on the community. They just destroyed it. And to this day, we don't know how many people died that day, but it has never been the same since. And if you were to go to Tulsa now, there's only one little block left of this area. And they have all these plaques in the street as you walk down the street where this used to, it was never rebuilt, or this was a law office, it was rebuilt at this point, or blah, 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 blah. So it's a great, and sort of quick getaway if you want to do that kind of a trip to go and study this history. But this is the postcards that came out that people were using to send messages. And you can see up here, it says Little Africa on Fire, Tulsa Race Riot, June 1st, 1921. So they're pretty proud of what they accomplished that day. So like I said, I was invited to come and make work there. Unlike San Antonio, the people in the Greenwood District in Tulsa, they're still, I was met with a warm, open arms for my project in San Antonio. Not so much in Greenwood. There's still a lot of pain there. There's still a lot of hurt. And it's been increasing lately because of, I believe Trump was going to go there and do a speech at one point, and it brought all this national news to Greenwood. Most people didn't hear about this until it made the news because of Trump. But because of that, now all these different media outlets and documentary filmmakers and all these different people are going into Tulsa wanting to make this story, and the people feel like they're being taken advantage of. Like, nobody wants to help them. They just want to come and benefit off of what happened to them. So when I went there, they really didn't want to take pictures. They really didn't want to, it was like pulling teeth to try to get someone to be a part of this project. But during my stay there, one of the things I learned was that the name Greenwood came from Greenwood, Mississippi. The original settlers in Tulsa, large numbers of them had migrated from Greenwood, Mississippi to build this district in Tulsa, and that's how they got the name Greenwood. And I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that my father was from Greenwood, Mississippi, born and raised, and that I have a connection to. So I felt like the best way for me to do this work was make it my connection to the space. Not to try to impose on them, not to try to tell their stories, wasn't like I was going to be living with them for a while, or I would have the right to try to tell their story. So all I could do was from my perspective. So I did this project with, I went back to Greenwood and took pictures in Mississippi, and I took pictures in Tulsa. So I created these diptychs, and on the right side is always the Tulsa image, and on this left side is always the Greenwood, Mississippi image. And this is a picture of me at 1 week old, and my father, he sent this image back to my grandmother. I was born in Germany, in Augsburg. He was in the military. And since, none of the family could see me, I was the firstborn. They were taking these Polaroids and writing little messages on the back, sending them to Greenwood. And I just thought that was such a wonderful expression of home and family and all of these different things. And so these images sort of framed in this diptych to me speak to those bifold frames that people would put on their movies. This is me on a seesaw, and the text gets cut off, but my father wrote, "Leticia loves the seesaw. We spend 2 hours on it every day." So it just gave me too a little picture of, what was in his head as a young father. And then next to it, you see this set of stairs that lead to nowhere. So the images from Tulsa are from a city block, and they're all in order of where the houses would have been on this block. They're not technically in the Greenwood district. They're about 3 blocks off. But for me, it poetically spoke to that loss of place and home, and it's kind of a gray day. And so that's that side. And then as we get these images of the houses on the left side for the Greenwood, Mississippi group, my mom went back with me when I went to take pictures in Greenwood, Mississippi. So I drove from Texas to Louisiana, picked up my mom, when we drove up to the Mississippi Delta, and then took her back, and then came back to Texas. So it was a great little trip, and I'm so glad I did it, because while we were driving, it brought back for her all these memories of when her and my dad were dating before they got married, and she would visit his parents up in Mississippi, and she told me all these wonderful stories, or like when he was drafted into Vietnam, and he would send her stuff back, still sometimes go up and visit his parents. So she showed me the exact block where my father grew up. By the time I was born, my grandparents had moved into a brick house, so they weren't in this area anymore. I never got to go into this house, and I'll show you which one is his when we get to it. But so I went and I photographed all these houses in a row, and as gold, they were all painted the same color, which was just amazing for me for this project. So there's 5 houses that are all in a row that are, my father grew up, where he played as a young man, and probably ran in and out of all these houses. So it's 2 city blocks, one in Greenwood and one in Tulsa. This is the actual house where my father was born and raised and grew up. And the last image is another one of the Polaroids that he sent back home. It's after my sister's been born. We're about 4 years apart, and he says, "Leticia likes to keep a hand on a job at all times. She's a living babysitter. She kisses the baby a lot. Sometimes kisses her cheek and has a red spot." And I just love the connection between that, like, writing of red spot, his handwriting, red spot. And then, as luck would have it, the last image on the Haskell Place side had these little dots of red in it that I just felt like was a wonderful tie-in connection to those 2 spaces, seeing the Greenwood, Mississippi side and the Greenwood district, and to kind of come together through this work. It was really, really great. What am I doing? doing on time? Okay. So this last piece I want to show you is actually a video. And this dawn chorus is what I had in the Fort Worth version of Aurora that just happened when they unveiled a new public art piece. They asked 10 to do an exhibition around this unveiling of this multimedia piece. When I started this project, and it's kind of morphed over the years, I had in residence in Tuscany. I know, awful for me to have to be able to go to Tuscany, but Tuscany is so removed from the work I do. As you've seen, my work is really tied to the African American experience and the Deep South. Ain't none of that going on in Tuscany. So while I was there, I found myself really drawn to, and we stayed in a villa, it gets worse. I found myself drawn to the birds that woke me up in the morning. It was a massive choir of birds every morning. And so I said, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna let the birds wake me up. I'm not gonna have an alarm clock. And when they wake me up, I'm gonna on the roof and I'm gonna do these recordings of bird songs. Did that every day for the whole time I was in Tuscany. And when I got back, I said, okay, now I need to learn something about birds. So I started researching, trying to figure out what bird sounds I had, and just trying to see if it would spark something. And I came across this website where scientists are now trying to record the songs of female songbirds. They're trying to record the songs of female songbirds. Okay, that's a tongue twister. Because all of their early studies were on the male. And they realized, Cedric's phone. Sorry. They realized that they hadn't recorded any female birds. And I was like, oh my God, are you killing me with this? Even birds, even female birds can't catch a break. So then I did this project with the protest signs, and it started with women. And them, similar to what I girls, I gave these female art color a protest sign. And I said, I want you to make something based on your understanding of the word suffrage. And it was coming up on the centennial also for the women's right to vote. And so suffrage has really two meanings. It means, obviously about voting and women's rights, but it also means a series of petitions or prayers. And just like with the little girls, I didn't tell them what to do. I just said, you make the sign. When you come, I'll photograph you, with every intention of this being just a physical art piece kind of project. Like I was going to be printing onto fabric and doing my thing. Well, then the pandemic hit and that work didn't get exhibited. To this day, I haven't shown the whole body of work of those physical pieces, but they have been in projection exhibitions. So in Denver, they have this project where they project artist images on this huge tower in downtown Denver. So these images got projected on there. And then I melded the images of the women along with the image of the little girls to create this video that's called Dawn Chorus. So I'm going to play that for you. And it's about 5 minutes. And when it goes off, then I'll be ready to take your questions. because it just loops. But that's it. So thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. I hear what questions you might have. Let me stop sharing this.
Great, thank you so much. I'm sure we're all applauding for you. Let me check. I'm going to check the chat. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to leave those in the chat and I will read them out loud. We'll give people a couple of minutes. I'll ask the first question while the questions are coming in. I'm curious, how do you, as you work on these projects, do you generally like dive in and work on one until it's finished, or do you work on multiple projects at the same time?
Yeah, I work on one at a time. I'm not very good at multitasking two projects. Mm-hmm. So I'm usually spending at least a couple years, unless like the one in Tulsa, I didn't have that luxury, so that work was made in a quicker amount of time, but I usually spend a lot of time. I'm kind of an artist that sort of feels my way through. Like I'll have an initial idea about what I want to do, and then I try to stay open, and I found that through the process, the work kind of guides me. Mm-hmm. And if I will allow it to, that it's a much stronger body of work than me sort of like sticking exactly to what I wanted to in the beginning. Mm-hmm.
All right, so a student asks if you still keep in contact with the people you photographed before.
Sometimes if they're open to that, sometimes people will say, hey, stay in touch, let me know what you're working on or you're doing this, then I will. But if they don't offer that, then no.
Great. Somebody says lots of applause in here. So people virtually clapping. Any other questions? Maybe people are trying to figure out how to ask questions. Yeah, it was really interesting to hear you talk about the second to last project, the connection with the red dots. It was super interesting. It's almost like gave me goosebumps to see how it connects at the end. Leticia is frozen. I'm wondering if she's going to come back. We did really well with teams overall, I think. We'll give it a minute. Maybe she will come back to us. If while she's returning and unfreezing, if there are any questions, feel free to add them to the chat. All right, so she's leaving, and hopefully she will return. I love teams so much. All right, welcome back. At least it didn't happen during the talk. This is okay.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
All right, I have a couple more questions for you. One from Christina Childless. Are you interested in pursuing more sound projection work?
Maybe. I've kind of been in talks with a lady. I'm doing this project on Texas Freedmen's Towns, and I'm collaborating with her. And we just had a meeting yesterday, and one of the things we're thinking about is as I go out and photograph these areas where there used to be Black colonies, and there's some residents there, maybe doing some recordings, either in like church services or interviews, and having those paired with the art pieces. Mm-hmm. So that's something that these are early talks, but something that I'm really interested in, and hopefully that will become a part of that project.
Great. Let's see, a student asks, what is it like being a person of faith as an artist?
For me, it's great. I don't have any problem with it. I often wonder, though, like with the talk, like today, when I'm giving my perspective, if and my views, how that comes off maybe to someone who doesn't have the same beliefs as me. I hope that they can hear me at least and realize I'm not trying to preach to them. I'm just trying to explain where the inspiration from my work comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't complain about that because I love being able to have that kind of a voice and stay true to myself in the process.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then I have a question. What drew you to work with embroidery?
You know, it seemed so natural that I was using the embroidery hoops that at some point embroidery needed to come up into the work. And I'm hoping to keep that up with this Texas that I was just talking about too. I think I was a little nervous about it at first because I'm self-taught at sewing. I have a sewing machine, but I don't know how to use it. I inherited it, and it's become sculpture, just kind of sitting around. So embroidery is very serious work, and I didn't want to do it myself, but the residency allowed me to work with others and benefit from their skill set. So I'll probably still use it, but that's what helped me to sort of jump into that boat.
Great. I have one more question. Another student asks, what is it like being a Black artist?
That's great too, because I get to tell my story, you know. And I don't know if it's because of everything that's been happening. Like, it seems like Black art is really taking off in the last few years. Like, people are really excited about what Black artists have to say and our voices, and so there's a lot of space for that. There's a museum in Louisiana that was built off of the collection of a plantation owner, and so all the paintings in this museum is of other plantation owners, so you know what it looks like. But they are so excited about integrating other voices into the collection that they would allow me to come in and put artwork next to some of their permanent pieces that have a conversation, you know. So there's this great opening of acceptance and wanting to hear that makes it really wonderful to be able to just tell, once again, my story.
I guess the student who asked the question just finished a mural about the work of a Black woman in World War II. So that's the person who asked the question.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. I think this is all the questions we have. Lots of compliments to you in the chat, which I'm sure you can look through after the talk. But your talk was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for being our visiting artist today.
Thank you. It's been my honor. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who sat through me talking really fast.
And also you said you have an exhibition up right now, right? Maybe
yes,
let's mention it.
Work and my neighbor is at Tally Dunn through the end of October.
Okay, excellent. So if you want to see Leticia's work in person, besides seeing it at UTA, you can see it at the gallery. And one last announcement that I have is our next visiting artist lecture is going to be in person on October 20th, and we're going to have Jay Allen visit us here at UTA. So we hope to see you then. Bye, Leticia.